And on that same note, there are new crime statistics that show crime is plummeting. In fact, Politico summed it up like this. Murder rates are tumbling across the U.S. in 2025. Homicide stats are down at least 20% over last year, and we could be on course for the lowest number on record. With President Trump in charge, the days of criminals being put over victims are over. On the topic of immigration, the Washington Post just ran one of the most ridiculous headlines ever, even by their standards. And on my very first briefing several months ago, I said I would hold anyone accountable in this room. The Washington Post actually had this headline, "The Mysterious Drop in Fentanyl Seizures on the U.S. Mexico Border." How is this mysterious? There is no mystery about why there is a decrease in fentanyl coming into the United States. This administration's strong border policies are the reason there has been a decrease in fentanyl trafficking. His strengthened relationship with Mexican President Sheinbaum and all of the measures he has been taking to deter illegal human and drug trafficking at our United States southern border is the reason for plummeting fentanyl seizures at the U.S. border. There is nothing mysterious about that, and we'd like to see the Washington Post update their headline accordingly. This is clearly trying to intentionally manipulate the minds of the Americans, and I think the American people understand why there's been a fentanyl drop. And our office responded to this inquiry. We provided a whole host of the reasons that fentanyl seizures at the southern border have dropped, and the Washington Post refused to run them, and that's despicable. In other news, positive economic reports continue to flood in. Inflation dropped to 2.1% in April. Personal income increased 0.8% in April. So inflation is down and wages are up. That's almost triple the expectations and against the doubts of nearly everyone in this room. And we also saw the largest monthly decline in the trade deficit on record as a result of President Trump's very powerful tariffs. Lastly, the price of eggs has dropped more than 61% since President Trump took office in January. I remember my very first briefing, I was asked about the cost of eggs. The reporter tried to insinuate it was this administration's fault, even though he had only been here for a few days or weeks. It was a result of the previous administration's terrible policies, and in record time, this president has fixed that problem that he inherited from Joe Biden, and now egg prices have dropped 61% since this president took office. There's a lot of good news, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions, so let's get to them. We have just the news in our new media seat today. Amanda Head, thank you for being with us. Why don't you kick us off?
Sure, thank you so much. There is a disturbing trend of anti-Semitism turning into terrorism. Of course, the Boulder, Colorado instance that you just mentioned, the 2 Israeli embassy staffers who were murdered, Pennsylvania governor's mansion with the Jewish governor inside getting set on fire. Does the president consider this domestic terrorism? And as such, are there official alerts to law enforcement, BOLOs, task forces, things like that?
The president has made it very clear, as he said in his statement yesterday, that yes, these anti-Semitic acts of violence are do qualify as terrorism, and he does not want to see terrorism or violence of any form taking place in the United States of America. And as for specifically anti-Semitic terrorism and anti-Semitic acts of violence and those that are targeting Jewish Americans, this administration has done more to combat that violence than any administration in history. And one incident is one too many, and I think frankly that's something the previous administration was not willing to say. This president will stand up for Americans of all religions, of all faiths, of all creeds, and we will continue to look at policy measures and actions that we can take in addition to the actions that have already been taken to curb this anti-Semitic violence. And to Jewish Americans at home, across the country, this president has your back.
And then on another issue, back in February, Secretary Kennedy created a commission to re-examine the childhood vaccine schedule. But there are still states outstanding like California, Connecticut, Maine that are not allowing any religious exemptions for kids not only to go to school but to participate in sports and extracurricular activities. Would the president want to see religious exemptions allowed across all 50 states? And how do you enforce that, especially with states like California that are already defying the president on the men and women's sports issue?
Generally speaking, I know the president supports religious exemptions for families when it comes to vaccinations. As for the instances in those specific states, I'll have the administration and the White House look into it and see what executive action, if any, we can take on that front. Thank you. Kelly.
Good afternoon. We're now in hurricane season, and obviously there is great concern every year about the potential for that. Can you speak to how the president is planning to have the level of support, should it be needed, to be as it has been with a reduction in the workforce? And is he still comfortable with Administrator Richardson, who had talked, whether joking or not, about not being aware of a hurricane season for this country? What is the President's level of briefings on what may be required? If you could give us kind of an overall update on that.
Sure. Well, of course, we know that we are into hurricane season now, and I know FEMA is taking this seriously, contrary to some of the reporting we have seen based on jokes that were made and leaks from meetings. But Secretary Kristi Noem and the FEMA leadership are all over this. They are committed to ensuring that federal resources and tax dollars are there for Americans in need, and the President continues to review requests for emergency aid and carefully considering them. However, this President has made it clear we're not going to enable states to make bad decisions with federal tax dollars and then have the federal government later have to bail these states out. We want to see states be responsible with their tax dollars to do as much as they possibly can, and then the President will deeply and thoughtfully consider any requests for federal aid that come to his desk. And I think some of the media reporting we've seen on this is frankly sloppy and irresponsible. There are serious people who are taking this issue seriously, starting with the President himself, who, as you know, on his first domestic trip back in office, visited both North Carolina and California, both of which were, of course, hit by natural disasters when he wasn't even president, but he took ownership of that and visited those places and those people immediately.
Is it
Brian?
about hurricane season appropriate, though, now that this is serious business, as you talked about?
It's serious business, Kelly, and I'm not going to engage in such fodder with a question like that. Brian?
Thank you, Caroline. Reuters was reporting that there is a letter that is meant to be sent to other countries, which would give these countries a deadline of Wednesday to produce their best offer on the trade matter. Why does the administration feel the need to send this letter? And I have one more follow-up on trade.
Sure, I can confirm the merits and the content of the letter. USTR sent this letter to all of our trading partners just to give them a friendly reminder that the deadline is coming up. And they are in talks. Ambassador Greer, Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lutnick are in talks with many of our key trading partners around the globe. As you know, Brian, I know the Wall Street Journal has covered this quite heavily. And they continue to be engaged in those discussions. And this letter was simply to remind these countries that the deadline is approaching and the President expects good deals, and we are on track for that, I will emphasize.
On the trade side, though, when the deal with the United Kingdom, there was this idea of a reprieve on the auto tariffs. Is the President looking to do another similar deal on the sector-by-sector reduction in tariffs, or is this more going to be deals related to the reciprocal tariffs that were announced months ago?
Well, as I've said previously from the podium, and the President has discussed as well, each country has unique advantages, unique challenges to it based on their markets and what they export to us and what we export to them. And so that's why the President smartly advised his trade team to engage in tailor-made deal making. And we saw that with the United Kingdom, and we will see that with other countries as well.
Kate. Does the President support the Senate moving forward with a bill imposing heavy sanctions on Russia?
Look, the President has spoken about his position on sanctions on Russia. He has smartly kept this as a tool in his toolbox if necessary, but I think the Senate and everyone on Capitol Hill respects the President as the Commander-in-Chief for a reason. And as you know, Russia and Ukraine engaged in direct talks yesterday. That was at the encouragement of this President when he spoke to both leaders of both countries via phone just a couple of weeks ago. And so I would just like to remind everybody how far we have come in just 4 months. I mean, it was inconceivable last year at this time for Russia and Ukraine to be engaged in direct talks. And it's because of the President's insistence and determination to get this war to an end that these countries sat down yesterday. So he's willing to use sanctions if he needs them, and the Senate and the Capitol Hill understand that the President is the Commander-in-Chief and he's leading United States foreign policy as he should.
Iran, the President said that the U.S. would not allow for any uranium enrichment, but the proposal offered to the Iranians reportedly allows for low levels of enrichment. Can you explain that discrepancy?
I'm not going to comment on alleged details of the report. We're not going to negotiate through the media out of respect for these ongoing discussions and negotiations that Special Envoy Witkoff is leading. The President made his position very clear on Truth Social last night. In fact, it couldn't be any more clear, and I would reiterate that's his position. Special Envoy Witkoff sent a very detailed and acceptable proposal to the Iranian regime that the president hopes they will accept, and if not, they will face grave consequences, as the president himself has reiterated.